Now, here's another one that's going to make your head explode. Not for me, though, because I think I covered part of this before a while back, but the numbers have increased. But for some of you, it's going to make your head explode if you haven't been watching this. So we're talking about where Donald Trump and Kamala Harris land with Black voters for 2024. And we're going to start with Donald Trump. Because regardless if you are Republican or you support Trump or not, there is something that is happening with Black voters supporting Donald Trump that I do think cannot be ignored. And people need to ask, what is he doing differently? Donald Trump right now has somehow managed to triple his support with Black voters when you compare it to 2016. Now, this was discussed earlier with Charlemagne the God, Angela Rye, and CNN. We'll go ahead and jump in. They seem to be a little bit confused. They don't understand where these Black voters are. I think that's what happens when you don't leave your bubble. Let's get into it.
Angela, to bring you in, those battleground polls also show Donald Trump pulling in 19% support from Black voters. That is actually triple what he got in 2020.
Pause. Let's just look at the number, folks. Black voters backing Trump for president in Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Nevada, those are swing states. 7% in 2020. Now he has 19% support. 19%. I have never seen this from a Republican candidate since I have been eligible to vote. Let's continue.
What do you make of that? What is he doing right to win them over?
I don't make anything of these polls that are talking to imaginary Black folks. I would love to know, for one, who they're talking to, because I've not seen.
So you think that they don't exist?
I think that they are, maybe, you know what, they might be the invisible man that Ralph Ellison talked about in his book. I don't know who these people are.
You don't know who those people are, Angela Rye, because you don't leave your bubble. I have had a number of people on this show that do not agree with me politically. The recent Black voter panel, you guys got to see Black voters that supported different candidates, some that were libertarian, some that were, self-described like Marxists, some that were Republican, like some that were supporting Kamala Harris, that were liberal. Black voters are not a monolith. And while the majority of Black registered voters do vote for the Democratic Party, something is changing this time around. Because how in the world, again, I have never seen a Republican candidate get that amount of support from Black voters since I have been old enough to vote. I have never seen it. So there has to be something different about Donald Trump's previous presidency when compared to Joe Biden's presidency that is making some Black voters say, you know what, I'm not going to support the Democratic Party this time around. Not to mention, and we're going to show the conservative support as well, because there were some Black conservatives that voted for Joe Biden in 2020 and not Donald Trump. So something is shifting. So these people aren't imaginary, Angela. If you got outside of your bubble of only talking to people who think and believe just like you do, and only talking to people that are liberals, and if you talk to some of those people outside of your class, you would see that those people are very real. He said, we're tired of the demon rats. Gifty said, Black woman for Trump here. Yeah, I mean, Angela and Charlemagne, You have to get outside of your bubble.
There was a Trump ad that was released, I believe today, that's targeting Black women voters. And there are these people who, you know, allegedly exist all throughout the country, and they're reading scripts. You can see their eye line going over here. And I think some of them might be paid to say some of these things. I'm not sure. But here's what I do know, Pam. You talked about this not being the case, Georgia not being the case for Joe Biden. Joe Biden did actually win Georgia in 2020. And I also want to give some credit to Kamala Harris, who has been to Georgia 7 times. This year, right? And so I think it's important for us to acknowledge the work that has been done. Their state directors talked about 35,000 new volunteers on the ground since Kamala Harris announced. They have well over 24 offices in that state. They're doing the work. And
pause. Yeah, they're doing the work. I will agree with this. Sure, Michael was talking about this on CNN earlier as well. He did say that Kamala Harris's team, they are not just going to the Atlanta area in Georgia. They are going to rural parts of Georgia, trying to recruit Black people who are not registered to vote as well. Speaking to some of those lower income communities out there. So I do agree with that. However, that being said, to Angela's point, she said Joe Biden did win Georgia. Exactly. So why is it that now Donald Trump has 19% of Black voter support? If anything, the exact opposite should have happened. His support among Black voters should have decreased. So that says something about the job of the Biden-Harris administration that I think Angela and Charlemagne kind of want to gloss over and pretend like it's not an issue.
So what you do see with polls and what you do hear from folks who are registered voters is that the tide is changing, that they're excited about the change and the excitement that Kamala Harris brought to the top of the ticket. And I think we really got to give more credit to the work. I'm not giving any credit to these polls. Polls end up being wrong all the time. And I've seen polls that say 15%, 19%, 18% of Black.
Polls are wrong all the time, except for when it's your candidate, because when the polls are presented to you, Angela, about Kamala Harris, you're totally fine with those polls when they're in favor of Kamala. So the polls work for you when it's your candidate. So this is something that people got to continue to point out here. So now all of a sudden she's saying the polls don't matter. Listen, I have been following this for quite some time. Donald Trump's support with Black voters has not decreased since Kamala stepped into the race. If the change was Kamala Harris, then why is it that his support has not decreased?
Black folks, I don't believe it at all. I really don't.
So I want to follow up with what you had said about, you know, who are these voters? As I said, the 19% of Black voters supporting Trump. Our CNN's Ali Reeve actually recently spoke to a Black voter in Virginia who owns a shop that sells pro-Trump merchandise. Here's what she said about his outreach to Black voters, and I'll get your reaction on the other end.
Wait till you see this, guys.
I think the efforts are succeeding tremendously. All the things that have happened to President Trump, the attacks on him, have done nothing more than strengthen Black people's connection to him. Because
so let me pause. This woman here, she owns a Trump store in Virginia. So you see what they're doing, right? They pick the most stereotypical Trump supporter. They found for the Black Trump supporter, they go and find the most stereotypical. I seen the whole interview with her, the whole stereotypical Black Trump supporter that there can be. That's what they do. Most people that I have spoken to that are supporting Trump are not on the same page as this woman. You have to see the full interview to see what I'm talking about, because as they walk through the store, she has, like, you know, funny joke t-shirts that say something about white power and all that kind of stuff. Like, she's on that level. So just keep that in mind. But Dana with the data, who was on here for the Black panel, for example, Dana with the data is supporting Trump, and she's not doing this stuff. You see what I'm saying? So what are they doing? They're trying to find the most outlandish black Trump supporter to feature and say, oh, these are the black people that are supporting Trump. When in reality, some of the black people that are supporting Donald Trump are people that you probably would never think would do it. Let's continue. I'll go back just a little bit when they first bring her in.
Nothing more than strengthen black people's connection to him, because now he's someone who is the target of a struggle, and they have always felt that they've been a target.
All right, Charlamagne, what do you think about that?
I think that I can't speak for all black people because we're not monolithic, and that woman cannot speak for all black people because we're not monolithic. And yeah, I think she sounds like to be totally honest, I think she sounds like a damn fool, but that's her opinion. And I do feel like, you know, Democrats.
See what I mean? So they brought on someone that obviously they can call the fool. They didn't bring on someone, a black voter who does not have a Donald Trump store. Let me let it finish, and I'll tell you what else I think about this. Sorry about that.
And yeah, I think she sounds like to be totally honest, I think she sounds like a damn fool, but that's her opinion. And I do feel like, you know, Democrats do owe black people a lot, you know, but last election, 92% of black people voted for Democrats, and that has been the case for a long time. I see that being pretty much the case this year as well.
Joe Biden did not receive 92% of the black vote. So I hope that's not what he was referring to when he goes last election. Maybe he's talking about the midterms, but Joe Biden did not receive 92% of the black vote. I've shown the data on the show before. He was in the 80s with his percent for black voters. And Obama still to this day has the highest support from black voters from Democrat presidential election. Nobody has received that 98% and that 95% that Obama has received. So I don't know why. Again, I told you they bring on Charlamagne. Charlamagne doesn't follow the data. He really doesn't. Like, you host the Breakfast Club. It is what it is. But notice what they did, right? So they had to pick out that woman. They didn't pick out like a black woman who doesn't have a Trump store, who may be very active in the black community and is not like obsessed with Donald Trump, but is voting for him because of economic issues. And that's what pissed me off about that segment. They're like, oh, let's bring out this woman and make her look like a total fool. So check this out. We're going to pull up the data. Donald Trump has doubled his support among black voters. It's actually tripled. I'm going to need for you guys to do math too. Boy, we're going to teach people some things. Let's get into this part here because I want you to see the difference between what happened prior. Let's see right here. We're going to come down here. Listen to this. This is the Morning Consult poll. The poll found that Trump's support among black moderates and black conservatives has increased significantly, doubling among moderates. In 2020, 8% of black moderates supported Trump. 8% of black moderates, again, so those aren't conservatives, supported Trump. Whereas in 2024, that figure has risen to 19%. Among black conservatives, 44% now back Trump, up from 24% in 2020. So even among the conservatives, even among black conservatives, in 2020, 24% backed him. Now it's 44%. So even in 2020, all black conservatives did not support him. Like I said before, some of those conservatives voted for Joe Biden. Some people didn't vote down ballot. I know people personally that voted for Joe Biden for president, but then they voted for Republicans for other positions on the ballot. The poll also found that the percentage of respondents with no opinion decreased by 5%. So listen to this. We're going to make a comparison. On the other hand, 51% of black conservatives support Harris, down from 65% who backed Biden in 2020. Among black moderates, 74% support Harris's campaign compared to 81% who supported Joe Biden. So what does this tell you about the Kamala Harris campaign and the Joe Biden campaign? Joe Biden received more support from Black conservatives and more support from Black moderates than Kamala Harris is currently receiving. Now, that can change come November, but why is that, folks? We have to ask these questions because remember, Joe Biden was not doing well in the polls. He was not the strong candidate. So Dem leadership said, Joe, you got to go. You're not going to win. The polls are showing you don't have a chance. Let's go ahead and bring in, he brings in Kamala to the disagreement of Obama, because Obama did not want that. He wanted an open primary, but he brings in Kamala. And according to the corporate media, Kamala is just soaring and surging through the roof. Like they're like, oh, this momentum and it is great. It's popular. It's woo, joy, 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 joy. They got the same artist that made the painting of Obama that said hope. They found him. He made one of Kamala, and this one said forward. It seemed like everything was lining up just perfectly for her. But they weren't showing us all the figures. And this is what I've been trying to explain to people. Now, Don Lemon is now back out doing the Man on the Street series. Like he's no longer with CNN, of course. Now he's kind of doing his own thing. So he's out there talking to Black voters on the street. And I want to show you what Black voters said to Don Lemon about who they were going to support in November. So listen to this.
How are you feeling about the election?
I'm going for Trump. I feel like every time they don't want somebody who is good for us to win, they throw somebody Black in our face thinking that's going to make us vote for the Black person.
I voted for Obama because he was Black. I don't want to vote for her because she's the first Black woman to run for president or to win.
I don't vote.
Well, I want Donald Trump. I'm sorry. I want Donald Trump.
Why do you apologize?
Well, I know nobody likes him, but we had good times with Donald Trump.
I'm running for Trump, so.
You are?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, why?
Yeah. I don't know. I just always been a fan of his, so that's what I'm running for.
I used to be against Trump. I used to live in Virginia. I saw the bad side of it, but really moving to Cleveland, I saw the other side of it.
I'm supporting Trump.
You are?
Mm-hmm.
Because?
Because it has to change. Yeah. It has to change, and now I vote more for what fits me better as a person rather than voting for the Black person or voting for the first woman. So
what do you think about Kamala Harris?
I think they say she's phony and fake, you know what I'm saying? So I'm like Trump saying, what are you, so I'm not feeling her. People get mad about it, I'm just not feeling her.
I don't like her the way she speaks, the giddiness, the laughing. Everything's a joke, and it's not a joke. We're in trouble.
I'm going for Trump. Kamala was on Biden's team, and I don't like Biden. Gas wasn't this high when Trump was our president. Food wasn't this high. I'm going for Trump.
How are you feeling about that?
So does everybody notice something here? There was one white woman. Sorry, I didn't want to forget about her. But does everybody notice something here? For all the hate that is being thrown towards Black men, because some Black men, it's showing in the polls that he is winning support in that area. These are Black women. A lot of the ones here are Black women. Nico House is in the, what is up, Nico? This is really how people on the streets talk about the two. And people think we're making it up when we tell them that, right? And so I would say to Angela Rye, you need to get out there on the street and talk to people. You have to get outside of your bubble, because when I have conversations with people just face to face, this is the same type of thing that I hear. I tried to warn people about this last year on Rising. I was like, I don't know. Or like, most Black people I spoke to said they're not going to vote at all, or they said they're going to vote for Donald Trump. That's what I've heard from most Black voters, but most are going to said they're not participating. So it is what it is, right? So we see this again. People are saying, I don't know where those numbers are coming from, but if you leave your studio and you talk to people on the street, you'll hear. So Jen Psaki apparently saw that clip from John Lemon, and she was not so happy about that. So she brought him on and Don Lemon decided to explain to her where people were coming from. Listen to this.
Was there anything, what did they think about Harris? Did they have anything to say about her?
They did have, listen, it depends on where you are. We went to a number of different battleground states in Pennsylvania, Ohio. We were in Michigan, Indiana. on our way, obviously, Illinois, on our way to Chicago. And it sort of depended on where you were. Pennsylvania, well, I shouldn't say Pennsylvania, I should say Philadelphia, was a bit more liberal, and the answers to the questions about her and him were quite different. But for the most part, in Pittsburgh or in at the Jersey Shore and in Atlantic City, in Ohio especially, many people did not know who she was. Right? They weren't familiar with her. So I think she has to reintroduce herself to the public. But for him, I think that they thought that he's better for the economy. And that, again, that he gave them, that he brought money into the community, and that, or that he was on black people's side.
See, and that's not something that Jen Psaki obviously wants to hear. Right? You see the look on her face. She doesn't want to hear that. Lisa said, why is he dressed like a 1920s gangster? I don't know. He does. He has on like the pinstripe. I don't know what's happening there. All he needs is the hat, Lisa. All he needs is the hat. But this is the reality, folks. When you talk to people just out on the street, this is what you'll hear. Like, everybody's not going to say, yeah, I'm supporting. A lot of people are not. And most of them, like I said, they're not at all. Yeah, Nico said, I've heard the same from most black voters I know too. They aren't voting, or they're voting to Trump because they remember what their bills looked like 3 years ago. Right. So Kamala, running on joy. I mean, what's the joy? I'm trying to figure out what the joy is supposed to be. Because if the joy is just you're not Trump, I don't get it. Now, here's the flip side. Because another poll came out, and I want to show you who is now helping Kamala Harris here in the polls. So shout out to the Harris effect, not the Harris effect, excuse me, Tom Bonnier. He calls it the Harris effect. 13 states have updated voter files since July 21st, and we're seeing incredible surges in voter registration relative to the same time period in 2024, driven by women, voters of color, and young voters. So here's what we're seeing, folks. This is the most shocking part here. Black women ages 18 to 29 have an increase of voter registration of 175.8% since Kamala Harris was announced. So it's mainly like a lot of the surges that you're seeing with voter registration here, it's from women. So you have Hispanic women, black, well, they do it by races, but Hispanic women, then just women, then black people, then black women, then Hispanic women, and then black women. So there is an incredible surge of black women registering to vote. Now, we would assume that because most black voters vote for the Democrats, that they would be registering to vote for Kamala Harris. Well, the gentleman who showed that poll there, he actually appeared on Joy Reid's show. I want you to hear a little bit of the breakdown that he gave about that.
As polling expert Tom Bonnier pointed out over the weekend, the explosion of voter registrations by women is clearly being driven by legitimate fears of how much more miserable and exhausting and deadly a second time Trump ruled America could get, particularly as compared to the prospect of an America fueled by freedom and joy.
What is
you
the joy?
tweeted about and prompted us to call you. When you tweet, we call you. And about this explosion of women registering to vote and the resulting gender gap. Can you please explain?
I'd be happy to. This really caught me by surprise because we're always looking at the registration trends. I know we're all obsessed with polling. I am too. But we know that polling doesn't tell the whole story. The more important data is that individual level data that's showing us the actions people are taking. So the question that we asked of the data was, could we see something that happened after July 21st with the candidate change? And what I saw was honestly shocking. We saw gender gaps in new registration data across the country in every state that we've looked at that has updated their file already, which is many, that were exceeding the post-Dobbs gender gaps that we saw. And we know those were bigger than any that had been seen before. And so we're talking about battleground states like Michigan and North Carolina, where it's not just little differences. It's women registering at a significantly higher rate than they were prior to that, or that they were 4 years ago at the same period of time, especially younger women and women of color.
So what that means is that obviously Kamala Harris is winning a lot of support from women, which we figured, right? We figured that would happen. Especially, I think some women are registering to vote just because of the overturn of Roe v. Wade. So that is pushing some women to come out and like, you know what, maybe they didn't vote in 2016, or maybe they did, but they didn't vote for Hillary or whatever. And they feel like, you know what, this time I am going to show up and vote for the female candidate. So we cannot ignore that surge there again of female voters coming out to register to vote, female women registering to vote ages 18 to 29. And the largest groups here are Hispanic women and Black women, 175.8% for Black women, 149.7% for Hispanic women. So Kamala Harris is getting a lot of support from women, and you cannot discount that. That being said, regardless, when it comes to the voters and it comes to the swing states, at the end of the day, who does it really come down to? And this is something Child of God mentioned earlier, which I was going to mention at the end of the segment, which is that it kind of comes down to the Black vote. Because in Michigan, if Black voters heavily come out for Kamala Harris, she's going to win. Remember, the Democratic Party, they can't win without the Black vote. So always remember that. Joe Biden was able to win Michigan because Black voters showed up to support him. That's how he won it. This is going to be similar in states like Georgia. It's going to be similar in states like Pennsylvania. I don't know if she will win. I think Pennsylvania will probably go to Donald Trump based on other polling that I'm seeing. But the reality is, if that's what it comes down to, then both candidates should be doing everything that they could to appease or try to win over Black voters. And you don't do that by bringing Meg the Stallion. You don't do that by bringing another rapper to dance in someone's face, because you don't do that to other groups when you go talk to them, right? So when you go talk to Asian Americans, you don't bring a K-pop group. So let's keep it real here. You do that by having a Black agenda. And Kamala Harris does not have a Black agenda. Donald Trump does not have a Black agenda. You know who does have a Black agenda? Jill Stein has one. Dr. Cornel West has some. Now, to be honest, when it comes to ballot access, as it stands right now, Dr. Cornel West, unfortunately, does not have a lot of ballot access. Jill Stein has most of the ballot access at this point in time. And she has a Black agenda. And she has cash reparations on her platform. So if you were a candidate and you knew this, it would almost be silly not to have that. Now, some people say, well, Biden ran on the soul of the nation and he didn't really have a Black agenda. That was also during the pandemic and the economy. People were losing their jobs. Businesses were closing. You have to keep these things in mind of what was going on at that point in time. You also had to remember we had mail-in voters during that time too. You had the mail-in ballots and everything. Very different time. And that was right after, you know, Trump's first term, and people were like, oh my God, we don't want this guy again. Let's get him out of there. Right. But now we already had a Biden presidency and the economy is a mess, and it's been a mess throughout his presidency. And now people are saying, OK, I don't know, man, actually, monetarily, things were better for me under Trump's administration. So that's how some people are looking. But that being said, if Kamala Harris really wanted to win in a landslide and she didn't want to have to worry about the third party candidates, then the way that you would fix that is by having a Black agenda, which you don't have. You have no policies on your platform at all. And they know this. So when their response to this is, let's get these people off the ballot, they're suing Jill Stein off ballots, suing Cornel West off ballots. They did this to RFK too, other than just presenting a Black agenda to encourage Black people, especially those that are not registered to vote, to come out and support you. But they don't want to do that because they really don't want to do anything for us. think about that?